Hello and welcome to part 3 of how to make an ebook. Ian here. I'm here to help you add small bits of code to your manuscript so it will look the way you want it to look as an ebook. In front of me here we have example code version 3 that you can download from the website. It has all the code and all the text added, but what I would like you to do is open up version 2. And I'm going to show you the code that I want you to cut and paste. Now you can cut and paste from the website, and I'll just show you the website. This is article 3 of how to make an ebook, and the code I want you to look at is here in a new section. Now it says poem image because in my ebook, before the story starts, I start the book with a poem. And that plus all the chapters have an image at the beginning, so I have a section called poem image, and what it does, it tells you that I have an image called poem tree and it is centered. Okay, and this is the code. Now all I want you to do is just right click and copy, and then copy it into the correct part of the example code, and I'll show you where you put it. After that we scroll down, and that's the image that you will see, and the next part of the code is this, which is the poem section. Okay, and we call it just simply poem because at the beginning of the book I have a poem before the story starts. So your book will probably be slightly different because you'll probably go straight into the story. The same rules apply. What I'm showing you here you can just duplicate for your chapter, but in tutorial 4 on video 4 I'll show you about changing this into chapters. But at the moment I'm just showing you about the image, and also with this section it's quite interesting. We have a code here, and what it does, it converts the whole poem into italics, and I'll show you and I'll tell you why later. So let's get cracking. Okay, we have the standard CSS code, okay, the classes, which we'll refer to later on. Now I just want to point out, which I've noticed, the code looks slightly ugly, which is a shame actually, because I've noticed when you add the code, and especially when you add spaces, okay, Composer seems to go a little bit wild, because sometimes it will do this where it will create its own space, so I'm just deleting them, and sometimes if you save or you preview, these spaces will actually disappear and it will look like that, which is can be a bit difficult to read when you're trying to figure out where you are. So at the moment I'm just going to separate this lot so we can see where we are in this code. Okay, and again it's just created an extra space, but it's still a very good program. But I will show you what I use later on this video. Okay, and something very special in it. It's called Live Preview, which is really cool. So what are we dealing with? Well, in the past videos we've dealt with the author section, we've dealt with the copyright section. Now we're going to deal with the poem image. I have a poem at the beginning of my image, so we need, or I need to tell the ebook, and I need to tell the browser how to get that image. So first of all, we create the section which is the poem image. I call it poem image because I know what's going to be here. So we start with a new section and I call it poem image, and we start it off with the less than sign, the exclamation mark, the dash, poem image, dash, and greater than sign. Remembering that all this is just simply ignored. It's just for you and I to know where we are, and for this I know that there is an image for my poem. We use the div tag, we use the ID, and the ID is poem the magic never ends. Now with the div tags and the ID you cannot add spaces, you have to add a dash, and it's called poem the magic never ends. And what that says is that when you have a look at the contents in my ebook, you will see in the contents, poem, the magic never ends, but without these dashes. And that becomes a hyperlink. And so in the contents, if you put your cursor over this in the contents and click it, it will take you straight to the poem. And this is all about creating a table of contents which is clickable for your ebook. That is later in another video, but we're adding it here now so it saves a big job later on. We have the P class, which is heading, and on the heading it's the magic never ends, which tells us that this is going to be slightly big. If we have a look at the heading class, there's no indent, it's normal font, but the size is 1.5. And we've learned that before, that the 1.5 is slightly bigger than the 1, so it's going to be a slightly bigger text. Okay, and it's a single class. We have the image. Now I'm telling the image that it is going to be center, so the class is center. We're adding an image, and the image is called poemtree.jpg. We give the image a name, and this is for a number of reasons. It helps people search for your image in Google Images, and it also helps for search engine optimization. So if you can, give everything a link, an image, everything on your website a name. Now in this particular case, the image is in a folder. So I have this file in a folder, and within that folder I have another one called images, and within that images folder I have this image called poem tree. If the image was in the same folder with the example code, I wouldn't have this, but because the poem tree is in a separate folder in itself where I keep all the images, then I have to tell it that it's in a folder called images. All explained in the blog tutorial. That section is finished by adding this. You're just repeating this, but I just put end of, so I know that it's finished. And that is it for my image. Very, very simple. All I want you to do is just cut and paste the code from the article and add it to the example code. Now underneath the image I also have some text, so I create another section, and the section is called poem, and it's the actual poem I have in the book. So in this case I drop down a line, I add a div tag. Now this is slightly different from this. It's still the same div, but instead of adding an ID, I add what's called a style. This div style helps me group whatever I have within this div. Let me explain. Within this style I have font style, and the font style is italic. So if I go to the P class and look for italic, we have it here. Font style is simply italics. I want everything to be in italics. Everything within a open and close div tag. So at the moment the div tag is open, and if I scroll down here, the div tag is closed. So everything in between the open div tag there and the closed div tag here will be in italics. So now, after I add the div style and I say that I want everything in italics, I add something to the beginning of every paragraph, the beginning of every paragraph, and it is this, the P class indent. So what I'm saying is that at the beginning of every paragraph I want it to be indented to the right. And how far is the indent? Well, I go up, the indent is 1.25. Most indents on ebooks range between 1.25 and 1.5. In my case I wanted 1.25. It just looked nice. I also have the line gaps increased to 130%. When I looked at it as normal 100%, it looked okay. So I wanted something better. So the gap between here, this gap here, is now going to be increased by 130%. rather than the standard 100%. A slight increase, but for me it looked nice. Once I've finished the paragraph, I close it with /P. Then on the new paragraph, I want it to have an indent, so I put it at the beginning again, then I close it. And I repeat, I close, I repeat, I close, and I repeat. You're just repeating the same code at the beginning of every paragraph. When you're finished with the last /P, you then close it with the div tag. Nothing else has the italic code associated to it. It's only the poem. At the end of that, I then have a page break, and then at the end I say end of poem. So now I know that that's the end of the poem section, and later on I can then start adding the chapters, but only in the poem section is it italics. In the chapters they won't have italics because I've closed it with this div tag. If I had put that div tag here, then this section will be italics and this section would be normal. So wherever you put that closed div tag, anything in between the open and close will be italics, and anything below will be normal text. But because I wanted the whole poem to be in italics, then the whole poem is in between the open div tag and the closed div tag. I hope you can understand that, but let's see what the result is. After you've added all the code and then click preview, you have the title, the copyright, the magic never ends, you have the image of the tree, and then you have the poem all in italics with the gap 130% here, and then you have an indent of 1.25, and that is exactly how it's going to look in an ebook reader. The ebook reader will have to do exactly what the code tells it to do. It tells it to have an indent of 1.25. It tells it to have a gap between the lines at 130%. It tells it that the whole poem is to be in italics. The e-reader has to do what the code says. So that is the example in HTML version 3. You have the image, the title, and the poem. And these rules here are exactly the same rules as if you were doing a chapter. So I hope you have learnt something here. It's quite a short video. So thank you very much for staying with me on this tutorial part 3. I hope you'll join me on part 4 when I release it. Would you please, if you go to my blog for parts 1, 2 and 3, could you share them on the link, and also tweet about them and add them to dig.com, and just tell the whole world about the tutorials. I would really appreciate that very much. So I hope you will come back for tutorial 4 when I've finished it, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time. Bye bye.